So this is me. I'm a mum of 4. So if I seem really giddy, it's because I left them yesterday and I haven't seen them in 24 hours. And I'm feeling very joyous about it. I do lots of speaking and talk about DE&I quite a lot, but I've been in the recruitment space for about 15 years. I started my career at Reed. I think they're here, aren't they? Hey! It was a fantastic start to my career. Absolutely loved it. I lasted probably not so long, and then I went in-house, yay! And I've been there ever since. I work at Cooler. We are a social media agency based in London and create all the fun social media things you see for some of your favourite brands. Very proud heritage. My mother is Jamaican, my father is British, and I'm very, very proud of that. And probably, I hope, the most controversial thing I'm going to say today is that Yorkshire tea is the best tea ever. Thank you. And if you don't agree, feel free to leave. No, I'm joking. But hopefully that has kick-started the session. So when I was going to kind of look at where to start, I always get a little bit... So I work in social media, I work in people, I'm a true millennial, so I thought let's start with a meme. And I found this one, and I thought it was absolutely hilarious. So someone tweeted, they got this response from a job, and it says, "Hello, Jeffrey. Unfortunately, due to company policy, we're unable to offer positions to people named Jeffrey because it does not work with our database schema." Anyone called Jeffrey? No, good times. But I thought it was really funny because it kind of is just what people share now. It's this really awkward thing about job responses, what people are talking about, how is the application process, and people will share them. And memes go viral because they're popular, because they're relatable, but they're not always positive. And so I talk a lot about DE&I because actually it's a hot topic, but also people talk about it quite a lot, and obviously the Jeffreys in the room, but we're going to look at talent strategy. So this for me is what we all do, right? Everyone does all of this on here. I'm in the right place. So we source, we hire, onboard, engage, develop and retain. But for the 2 subjects I kind of want to talk about more so today are the hire and the retain. And hopefully you'll leave here with some ideas of how to do a bit more DE&I in both of those areas. So I'm going to throw a question out to you, and you can write this down, you can shout out a word, you can shout out the answer or pop your hand up. But what does true inclusivity in your talent strategy look like? Anyone got an answer to that? Anyone? Awkward. No?
Creating an environment for completely equal opportunities for anyone regardless of background in the spectrum.
Yeah, love that. Anyone else? Yeah.
Equal opportunities policy.
Yep.
Equity, not equality.
Ha. Yes. I'm going to talk about equity and not equality. We use the word equality quite a lot, and naturally so, because it's the word that people talk about a lot when we talk about DE&I, but it's actually probably not the best place to start. The best place to start is looking at accessibility. And when I do any talk, the first thing I do is look at the actual dictionary definition of each of those words, and accessibility has 3. The first one is the quality of being able to be reached or entered. Entered can also be to gain access to. The second is the quality of being easy to obtain or use, and the last is the quality of being easily understood. And I want you to look at entered, used, or understood, and I want you to think of your own recruitment processes that you have at the moment, or your website, or whatever your hiring looks like. Can you answer honestly that for a diverse range of people, it's easy to gain access to, it's easily understood, the process is user-friendly, and not just for you as an individual, but for as many people as possible. So that's people who are neurodiverse, people who are early in their career, people from marginalised backgrounds. And if you can't, that's the place to start. And I'm hoping that actually some of the things we talk about and some of the things I share will give you things that you can enter when you get back that will help you on that journey. So accessibility for me means options. Options create accessibility, and accessibility creates equity. And the reason why I talk about equity and not equality is because when you give everyone the same playing field, if you go, right, this is the process for everybody, it doesn't actually give everyone a level playing field. And I think this image is probably one of the best images that I've ever seen to explain it. So equality, everyone has exactly the same process. That's what they do from start to finish. Doesn't matter who they are or where they come from, where they find the job, where they apply, how they interview, what that looks like. It's the same for everyone. That's equality. But if you can see on the image here, it doesn't necessarily make it accessible to every single person. So what you have to do is create equity. So that's creating different options for people throughout your process. Because what that does is then give everyone a level playing field. And there's this thing around, well, if we do it differently for everyone, then it makes it unfair, but it doesn't make it equal. And then I'm like, but look at this image. If we make it equal, it actually doesn't give everyone the accessibility that you want. And then you can't create diverse teams. And then you don't have the inclusivity. And then you go around in this big loop. So what can you do in your processes now? So provide options of how candidates submit their profile. And I know this is a bit of a one, because CVs are what we do, but for someone who's been in recruitment for a very long time, I'm not a huge fan of them. Because I think I don't even know what grades are on my CV, if I'm completely honest with you. I probably made them up at the time. I'm very good at my job now, and that's been assessed, which is why I still have it. But people will write whatever they write, and not everyone can write a CV, particularly people who are very early on in their career. So have you got options for people to present themselves or their profile in a different way? So we use Team Taylor. Cheeky little plug there, Seb. But it gives people an option on how to submit their profile. So people can send us a show reel, they can send us a video talking through some experience that they've got, they can send us their CV if they want to, they can send us their LinkedIn profile, they can send us, some of our creatives will send us some previous work they've done or a portfolio. And I know that's quite easy in some of the creative space, but actually some people just like to talk to camera and be able to explain what they've done or say why they really want to work here. But have you got that option for everyone? And I think it's something that's really important and actually not a particularly challenging one to do. Check that the job assessments are relevant to the job role. I had a client a few years ago who everyone who went through their process, they had a task and they had to present it back to a panel. Anyone else have that in their process at the moment? Yep, a few people nodding. And one of them did it for a data analyst role. And they kept saying to me, oh, all these people get all these candidates and it's really great. And then people just aren't very good at presenting. And I was like, but are you assessing their presenting skills? What are you trying to assess? Oh no, we're assessing their analytical skills. So why do they need to present it back to a panel full of people? Oh, right, but that's just the way we've always done it. So all these poor people were coming through the process, and people who were particularly introverted, people who were neurodiverse, people who didn't like presenting were absolutely fantastic and probably perfect for the job, but were getting into this interview with this panel of people and then being assessed on how they presented that data. And it didn't make any sense. So have a look at all of your assessments. Are they actually relevant to the job? Are you assessing the right things in that? Are you looking for the right things? And is there an alternative way you can assess for the same skills? Give candidates an option of how they interview. Do they have to come into your office? Do you do them virtually? Old school telephone interviews. I did one the other day. Someone just said they get really, really nervous. They explain they're neurodiverse. They find it quite frustrating and a bit distracting. Can we have a telephone interview? We did. It went great. Then she came into the office for a coffee. Fine. She's landed the job. But has anyone got that option? Do they have to come into your office? The other thing as well, we had an office somewhere I used to work. It had a glass door, and we used to call it the fishbowl. Because everyone would walk past it and stare in. Or the other thing which I absolutely hate is when a candidate comes in and you're interviewing, you've got to walk through the office to get to the meeting room, and everyone in the office goes quiet and goes like this. And then we're wondering what job have they come for, where are they from. For a candidate, that is horrendous. For someone who's neurodiverse, for someone from a background that doesn't particularly like being in that scenario, it's really not a nice thing to do, but we don't think about it. We just go, oh, we're going to the meeting room, come on. And we'll hop along and walk through the office. So can you give people another option? Does that have to be something that they do? I'm going to skip through a few of these and you'll be able to see them later. Sharing interview questions or tasks prior to the interview. Does anybody do that already? A couple of hands. I'm not sure who in the recruitment world said it was like some CIA secret information, the interview questions, and we don't send them to everyone. People can't cheat their way through an interview. It's really difficult to do that, but we don't send them the interview questions prior. And for some candidates, that is a massive, massive downfall. I know loads of candidates who've come through and they've gone, I just don't like getting questions thrown at me. I haven't got time to think through the answer. And it's not that I haven't got the answer, I just can't manage it in that way. So we send the interview questions beforehand. Nobody's cheated their way through it. There are still people who come in and haven't got the answer or aren't able to provide examples. But most people actually have the chance to read through it, to actually think, when did I do this? When can I provide a really good answer? And actually, the results we get from people who perform better in interviews are significantly higher. And again, it's not because they're cheating their way through, but it's because they've got an opportunity to think about it. And that's particularly important for candidates who are neurodiverse. Include questions around DE&I. Is it a value of your business? Is it something that you live and breathe and do every day? Can you incorporate questions in your interview to know that when people are coming into the business, it's a subject that's important to them too? And the last one on here is hold reverse interviews. Does anyone do that at the moment? No? So for us, reverse interviews are when the candidate can interview somebody who already works at the business and can ask them questions. And what we found, particularly for those who come from marginalised backgrounds, is they will sometimes want to interview someone who is similar to them to understand what that looks like. So, for example, our leadership team, we've got quite a good gender split. I think we're 50-50 at the moment. And we had someone the other day who came in for an exec role and they wanted to interview or reverse interview another female leader in the business. They wanted to understand what that journey was like for her, what working with the CEO was like. But have you got that option? Can people interview? And I think people get quite scared. Obviously, you wouldn't ever give them someone who's just handed in their notice and is about to leave, probably not the best person. But have you got advocates in your business? Have you got people who can sit down and actually share what it's really like to work there, what the culture's like, and let them have answer those questions? So I love this quote. It's from a CEO called Atif Chowdhury, and he says, diversity is about counting people, but inclusion is insisting that they count. And what I find when I've been asked to come into businesses before and do some consulting work is they're like, we want to diversify the business, we want to diversify the business, we want more candidates, we want to get more people in the business. And then they get there and it's not a safe space for them to be. And what I mean by that is nobody looks like them. There's no safety measures in place, there's no ERGs for them to feel supported. Sometimes there's not even policies in place to support them. So what does that look like? It's all good and well wanting to diversify your business, but what happens when those people walk in the room? And I had a conversation with a client once where I said this, and she said, well, when I first started, I thought it was fine. I walked in, and it was great, and everyone was like me, and it was fantastic, and I made loads of friends. And I was like, right, okay, but you're a straight, middle-class white woman. So it was okay for you to feel that comfortable. But if actually it was a gay black man that walked in the room, would he feel the same comfort and feel the same level of safety when he walks into your office? And she was like, I never thought about it like that. And we don't. We don't because we center ourselves in a lot of the processes and we don't often consider what it feels like for other people walking into the room. So just a couple of stats for you. 77% of employees and 80% of leaders who are disabled choose not to share their disability at work. 46% of people from the LGBTQIA+ community do not come out at work. And 75% of employees feel they need to mask their differences while they're at work. That's a huge number of people. And for anyone who's been in an environment where you feel like you have to not be yourself when you're at work, it is exhausting for people to come to work and have to deal with microaggressions, to come to work and have to deal with people asking really ridiculous questions, or to come to work and feel like you have to be anything other than yourself to be able to fit in or to be able to get a seat at the table. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. And what that does is the people in these stats will not stay. They will not stay in your business if it's not a safe place for them to be. So how do you create a safe environment? And these are just a snapshot of some things. Of course, there are a million other things you can do. But do the work at the start. And what I mean by that is be really open about the position that you're currently in. Anyone can write a DE&I statement. Loads of companies do it. Oh, we're really inclusive. It's really great. And then people get there and they're absolutely not. But be really honest about it. If your business isn't diverse, say that. Say, but this is what we're trying to do to tackle it. This is what we're trying to do to be better. This is what we're trying to do. These are the actions that we're taking. These are the people we're consulting with. Share that. You can't fake it. People will see through it. But be honest about it and do that at the very beginning. And let people have that option. Let people see that and go, okay, at least they're doing this, and then make that informed choice. Know your data. And I know this is a little bit of a hard one because it's not easy to obtain all of the time, but I think knowing your data is significantly important. It's also important looking at your retention and breaking down the retention or your attrition rates into marginalised groups. So do you know what your attrition rates are? Do you know who's leaving? But what's that impact on your DE&I data? Are there particular groups of people who are leaving far more than others? Do you know that information? Can you see that information? Because you can use it. Implement ERGs if you haven't already. Everyone know what they are? Has anyone got any? No. So employee resource groups, a few hands have gone up, are fantastic. We started ours by having a DE&I committee, and then people kind of branched out into creating ERGs off the back of that. But they are so important. We've got a couple at work, and we ask them and put them into decision making. When we're changing process, we ask them what's important. Is this going to be the best way to do it? What's your impact? What's your input? Can you share that with us? So they're not just there to celebrate the 1 month of the year. That really frustrates me when people just put a rainbow flag in Pride Month and then don't speak to any of their employees for the rest of the year, or just do something in Black History Month, because I don't know if anyone knows, but people are often gay and black all the time, not just in June and October. But companies do it, and actually it's not the best thing to do. Why are you not talking about these things all of the time? Why are you not supporting your employees all of the time? So have your ERGs, don't just have them at the fun things. Oh, Pride's coming up, what can we do? Let's have a fun party with rainbows. No. Have you got a trans equality policy in your business? Have you looked at your maternity paternity policy and have you changed language? We use birth parent and non-birth parent leave. All of those things are really important, and they're important to potential candidates, and they're important to the people who are already there. The other things to look at, have established onboarding. I know it sounds ridiculous, but for recruiters, and I'm very guilty of this, I used to be like, they've signed their contract now. Whew. They're not mine anymore. But they are. Because one thing that's really always for you to do all of that hard work, sourcing, going through the processes and getting them in, and then kind of just going, off you go, and then sending them out into the world of the office. And I often think about it, about being like my kids at school. Like when I go to the potential schools for them, I look at the teachers, I look at which would be your hiring managers, I look at the environment. Is this safe for them? Are they going to enjoy it? Are they going to thrive here? You should be doing that for your potential candidates too. Are you going to put someone with a hiring manager who probably isn't the best person to manage them? But are you even thinking of that? Because often we're not. We're just thinking we're going to fill the job because the pressure's on, and the hiring manager wants someone because it should have been filled yesterday, and nobody's got any time, so you're going to do it. But you've got diversity quotas to hit because you want to hit them, so you recruit someone and then you put them off, and it's not the best place for them. But are we thinking that far ahead when we look at onboarding, when we look at a safe space for them to be? And don't shy away from difficult conversations. It's not easy. Kind of calling things in. I'm going to look a little bit at calling out versus calling in. But you have to have them. There are always hiring managers who say very questionable things. I've had loads. I had someone the other day who, and it pains me to repeat it, but I want people to understand this is literally what people think and say, and it wasn't where I currently work. And I was on a video call and he said, so like in the process, do you like measure for like, you know, mental things? I was like, sorry, pardon me? And he's like, you know, like, and I was like, are you actually asking me that question? I had to ask him to repeat it because I was dumbfounded. But that is what some hiring managers are like. That's sometimes what we're faced with. And what I didn't do was go, correct him and leave it at that. What I said was, let's pick this up after. And I told him why that was an uncomfortable thing to say, educated him about what we need to do next, and then asked him, actually, if I find a candidate who's neurodiverse, are you the best person to lead that person when that's the question that you're asking? Probably not. So it's something that is worth considering and asking all the time. So disrupt what you thought to be true or what you know to be true. It's very easy to just have a process because we have a process and it works and we fill the jobs and it's okay, especially when there's a time pressure, and there is always a time pressure. But disrupt that. You cannot create change without disrupting what's currently happening. And it's very easy if you're new in your role to kind of just pick up stuff and go, okay, this is the way we always do it, this is the way that works. But actually, if your environment is not safe for people, if you haven't got a diverse team, then sorry to say your process actually isn't working at all. And it's something to consider. So, how to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Acknowledge that there's an issue. One thing I find really interesting is when we, before when I was doing consultancy work and I'd go to a client and they'd be like, I just think we're so diverse, like it's just that we just haven't got an issue. And I look around the room and I'm like, okay, are you sure? And then I pull up a picture of their leadership team and everybody is a straight white middle class man, and they're like, but we haven't got an issue because he lives in Derby and he lives in London and we're so diverse. I'm like, you're not. You're really not. Acknowledge that there's an issue, and don't shy away from saying there is an issue when there is one, and call it as you see it. People get really frightened about shouting it out or saying. So I pulled up an image of that client's leadership board because they had it on their website. I said, can anyone see anything wrong with this picture? And they were like, no. No one sees anything wrong. And I said, but you're all white and you're all middle class and you're all straight. and they were, because we talked about wives and stuff, so I didn't know them, I didn't make an assumption. And I was like, so you don't think anything's wrong with this picture? But we've worked really hard to get our jobs. I'm not questioning that. But call it as you see it. Don't be afraid to call that out. But if you are, and there's 2 ways to do that, calling things in versus calling things out. We at Cooler have created a culture where we call it out versus call it in versus calling it out. Sometimes you have to call things out, and there are 2 separate ways of doing that. So for example, bringing up the picture and saying, do you see anything wrong with that? I'm calling them out. I'm making it quite obvious. It's quite abrupt. It's quite direct. If you're calling something in, and it's probably a culture you want to create at work, it's taking someone aside and saying, can I just understand what you meant by that? It's a slow-paced conversation, but it's one that's probably more patient and a bit more around educating them on what's next. But calling things in is really, really important. If we don't have those conversations, things won't change. And it is uncomfortable, but the thing I always say to people when they go, well, I don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation, I don't want to be the one to say it, it's do not center yourself in this conversation. The feeling that you feel that's uncomfortable will last. It's temporary. It's whatever the duration of that conversation is. But for the employees who are in the room who don't feel safe, for the employees who come to work and they get told microaggressions every day, or people make really ridiculous comments, it's far more uncomfortable for them than it is for you to have that one conversation. So don't center yourself in that. Consider your intention versus impact. I always say to people, if your intention is good, please don't be afraid to start the conversation. I think intention makes such a massive difference. So if you're saying it because you think it's the right thing to do, it's this thing that I need to do, then do it. Always take action. And I say it a lot. I'm like, take action, do this, even if it's something really, really small. But it creates change. If you don't disrupt it, it doesn't change, it's going to stay the same. And you're going to have the same teams doing the same thing and the same problems. You won't have diverse teams because they won't stay. You'll do all this hard work in your process and they won't stay. And then you'll just have to do this constant churn all of the time. And then the 3 things I always talk about, and it's commitment, patience, and consistency. The one thing people do is they will ask me to come in and do some consultancy work, or I've done a talk and they're like, brilliant, we're going to be like amazing tomorrow. No, you're not. Not tomorrow, probably not the next day, probably not the next week, probably not the next month. This is a long change. When you're shifting a culture, when you're changing process, when you're having difficult conversations, you're not going to see a change overnight. You have to be patient, but what you can't do is not see a change in 2 or 3 months and then just think, well, this isn't working, so we're just going to stop doing it now. This is definitely the long game, and I know that's hard. It's hard to get buy-in when it's a long game because people want to see the commercial stats, they want to see the change, they want to see the impact of what you're doing straight away. But that's not easy when we're dealing with people. We're not always going to see that instantaneously. So, given that, hopefully that was informative, I will hand over to Natasha for the Q&A. Thank you very much.